All right, y'all. I don't know where to start. I guess we're just going to start from the beginning. So, nope, I still don't know where to start. I'm nervous. And so we're going to start in prayer because I need to get these nerves out. I need to get comfortable. And we need to invite the Lord to be here with us today because I'm nervous. And I can't be nervous talking about the Lord. So let's get started. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for giving me this time today to bring glory to your name in some way. God, I pray for the person on the receiving end of this prayer. I pray for anything that they're dealing with. I pray for anything they're worried about in this time. I pray that you give them this time to just listen and speak. And I pray that the words that I speak touch them in some way. God, I pray that you use me as a vessel in any way, shape, or form that you see fit. And I just thank you for your goodness. I thank you for all the work that you've done in me. I thank you for the testimony that you've given me. I thank you for the redirection you've given me in my times of need. And I just thank you because you're so awesome and I love you so much. And it's in your precious name I pray. Amen. Okay. All right. Now I need to sip my Red Bull. And I don't want to hear it. I know it's bad for me. But I got to do what I got to do. All right. So welcome. If this is your first time meeting me, my name is Whitney. If we haven't spoke in a while, allow me to reintroduce myself because a lot has changed. And if you have seen me in any form of fashion in any part of my life, I may not appear the same or, present myself as the same. And that's just because God has been working on me. God has been working in me and God has been working through me. And so allow me to reintroduce myself. So I'll say, this is Kashi right here. It's past his bedtime. We're in Houston and it is about 10 or 11 o'clock right now. And the Lord told me today is the day that we're going to do this. And so today is the day that we're doing this. And I've been putting it off for quite some time. But I know now is when I'm supposed to start. And so first things first, I just want to read to you guys what this podcast means to me and what my intent of it is. And then I just want you guys to get to know me a little bit more because y'all have to understand where I'm coming from. You have to understand why I have the faith that I have, so that we can just be cool. We can be family and y'all know where I'm coming from when I'm speaking to you all. And so I'm just going to read a little bit about the podcast firstly. 1 Corinthians 3 verse 7 says, "So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. Remember, God makes all things grow, but sometimes it takes planted seeds to get started." All right. So, the name Faith That Blooms came to me at a very weird time in my life. I felt like God had been nudging me to start a podcast for so long. And for so long, I fought it myself because I just felt like I wasn't equipped. I wasn't at the place in my faith yet. I wasn't at the place in my journey yet to, put it on a public platform. I wasn't ready to have that out loud faith. Oh, Cash, you leaving us? All right, go ahead. I wasn't at that place to have an out loud faith, is what I call it. I was kind of like in the prayer closet myself, by myself, between me and God, between me and my close peers. And so I wasn't ready. And I also just wasn't equipped at that time. I didn't know a lot of the things that I know now and that I'm still learning. And so he placed it on my heart and I knew that I needed to be prayerful about it. I knew that I wanted this to be his podcast and just me being the vessel that he uses to, share the word, share the gospel. And so I was in the shower one night and that's a lot of the times where I get kind of my aha moments where God speaks to me. And I was listening to gospel before the shower and I turned it off and I was like, I just need to sit in silence and, have this one-on-one time, so to speak, with God. And it just came to my head, Faith That Blooms. And I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. And it was one of these late nights and I got up after my shower and I just started creating everything, started creating all the graphics. And the Lord has just gifted me with that gift of being able to make graphics, honestly. And so I was able to make them all myself. I stayed up. And even that, it was like, okay, I had an idea of what I wanted in my head, but it definitely wasn't that it turned out to be. And so it was definitely done through him. And so I'm going to try to do this in one pass if I can, kind of sharing my testimony. And if we're being honest, if you know me in real life, or if you've seen me on social media or anything like that, I am not the most vulnerable person. And I don't think there's anybody that would describe me as such, even my close family, my friends. I have always been someone who just keeps a lot to myself. And if I'm going through things, it's between me and God a lot of the times, until after that season has passed. And then I feel comfortable allowing other people into my life. And so this is a very vulnerable moment for me. And it's taken a lot of prayer. It's taken a lot of strength, a lot of courage to try to get to this point where I am comfortable sharing my testimony, because I know that God has a plan in the midst of everything that he's put me through, or the midst of everything I've been through, I'll say. And so I'm going to put my Bible away for just a second, because we're just going to talk. And I'm just going to talk to y'all about my life and what's been going on. All right. So my testimony, excuse me because this is going to be all over the place. My testimony is not a one-way street by any means. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of reintroductions, so I call it, or taps and nudges from God. But I'm going to go back to the very beginning. So as a child, I was always told this story. And Mom, if you're listening to this, you can attest to that. I was told that my parents were going through a hard time. I'm not really sure the exact scenario, but that they were really stressed out. And I was just about 2 years old, playing on the bed, playing with blocks or whatever a 2-year-old plays with. And I looked at my dad and said verbatim to him, God, I said to him, Daddy, God told me that it's going to be okay. And then I went back to playing. And they told me this story from a very young age. And they were like, God has had a plan for your life since you were young. He's always spoke through you. He's been in you from a very young age. And so as 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all through childhood, didn't know what that meant. I guess I went through a phase where I also told them that the angels were speaking to me. And so I always had some sort of connection to God, I'll say. And I also grew up in a family that we went to church. We believed in God, all of those things. And so I knew who God was. I knew of God, but I didn't have my own relationship with him. And so I categorize it as the three nudges I have. And I think there will be times where I dive into each of these 3 nudges at a later point in the podcast. But for now, I'll just kind of give you guys the summary of what led me to my ultimate relationship with God. And so the first nudge, I'll say, when I was 15, me and my sister, Brittany, went to Atlanta to visit our 2 oldest sisters, Sydney and Courtney. If you haven't figured out, all of our names rhyme, and I'm one of 5 siblings. So I'm number 4. I'm baby girl. I have a younger brother. And so me and the sister directly above me, Brittany, we went to Atlanta to visit Sydney and Courtney. They went to school at UGA to play softball. And so we were just out there visiting them, having a great time. Now, I was also the sibling who grew up the fastest because I had older siblings. And so I was doing a lot of things I shouldn't have been doing at that age. I was in places that a 15-year-old should not be in, but, I was there. And so, basically on the last night of us being in Atlanta, we went to Waffle House, to eat at a diner, and me, my sister, and one of my older sister's best friends were robbed at gunpoint. It was us 3 in the restaurant by ourselves, along with a waitress. And needless to say, at 15, that was a very traumatic thing. It wasn't it was an armed robbery. And so anybody who has gone through that can understand the scariness, the fear, all of those things. But that was the first time that I prayed to God myself, and I prayed out loud myself. I don't remember a lot of what happened, and that's honestly by the grace of God that he has wired our brains to kind of shut down some things. But I went through a lot of therapy after coming home. But that was, I remember the moment that I hit the ground, and I prayed to God, and I was just like, God, get me out of this. God, just get me out of this. God, if you're real, just get me out of this. And I just kept repeating it over and over and over again, to the point where I really couldn't hear much of anything else going on in in the building. And we got out of it. We got out of it safe. And so, yeah, that was kind of the first nudge. And I knew I felt God's presence. I knew we weren't alone in that building, in that place in Atlanta. And it was such a weird experience, especially at 15. I grew up in a very suburban neighborhood where people just didn't go through things like that. And so it was kind of like a scene out of a movie where you never expect somebody to go through that. And I definitely didn't expect myself to go through it. And so coming back to school, it was the week before school started. It was a thing, and so I didn't really want to talk about it. There was a video of it happening. I myself have never seen this video, but my close friends did, and seeing their reactions to the video traumatized me as well, because they didn't take it very well. My dad was in extensive therapy afterwards because I called him in the midst of everything. I have no clue how I did that, but he thought we were laughing, but we were screaming. And so it was a very traumatic event. And so that is the first nudge. And if I'm honest, I wish that, if I could go back, maybe I could turn around and change my life then. But instead of leaning into God, I think I was confused why I went through that. I was angry that I went through that. And shortly after, my sister was starting college. And so she went away. The other two went away. And it was just me and my brother. And I didn't want to, put all my worries onto him, and so I felt very alone. And so I went into a spiral of doing things I shouldn't have done. You name it, I did it. And I did it in public settings, all types of things. And I'm just not proud of the person that I was in that season of my life. I hurt a lot of people through my words, through my actions. I was not kind to people. I wasn't kind to myself, to my body. And I was mad. I was angry at the world. And a lot of people just saw it. I was like, oh, I'm having a great time. I'm having fun. YOLO. I'm 16 now. I'm driving. I'm doing all these crazy things. But it was really just because I was so hurt deep down inside. And that fear, that anxiety was just always, it was a constant fear every day. And so I just, I felt like I had lost a part of myself. And so I found myself in other ways. So that's the first nudge that I will say from God, and I ignored it. So the second one, at the time, actually, of the robbery, my great-grandmother was living with us. And we didn't always have a great relationship. And I'll just say that. She was a very, very, very strong-willed woman. If you met her, she was a girl's girl. She knew she was the girliest girl. She's the type that you put your bag down, she's going to tell you something about it. Your nails always need to be done. Hair always needs to be done. She did not play, okay? She was a Southern woman to the T. Loved her husband like no other. Made sure everybody's plates were made. Cooked 3 meals a day. She was a woman, okay? So she moved in with us because she was really sick. She had heart failure. And she was declining pretty rapidly. She wound up living with us for 4 years, and we eventually got very, very close. And she was the most faithful woman that I have ever known. And let me tell you, in the midst of anything she went through, she would say, but my God is great, every time. And I would always be like, but Grandma, you're sick. Like, is God going to come down and heal you? Like, all those things. And I would always say that, but I knew better than to ask her, because she did not play about her God, honey. Let me tell you that. And so I got to have a firsthand experience at just her faithfulness. When I tell you, her church members called her every single day. I'm not even kidding. For 4 years, every single day she's talking to at least one of them. The pastor was involved in her life. She was faithfully serving, even though she couldn't make it to church anymore. She made sure that her presence was known. She was giving, all those things. If anybody needed anything, there was no question about it. And so when she passed away, I was there. I got to see her take her last breath. I went downhill. And not in the sense of acting out this time, but in my emotion. I was so hurt. I had never lost somebody close to me before, and I took it very, very hard because she lived with me. I saw her every single day, and I saw her decline. And so her death really affected me. This is her necklace that I have on right now. But I'm just grateful that I got the privilege to be with her in her last days and her last moments and say my final goodbyes to her. But I took her death very hard. Prior to her death, and on January 7th, 2019, that Christmas, my father had given us a devotional, A Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. Love that book. And I wasn't really into it. I was not in a place where I really was trying to learn more about my faith. It was like I was a #blessed type of Christian, meaning, I believed in God. I would wear a cross. I would throw #blessed on stuff, but I didn't have a relationship with God. I knew of him still. I did not know him for myself, and I wasn't trying to get to know him, essentially. And so when she passed away, I had opened it a couple times and just, here and there read it. And for some reason that night, I just felt God telling me, like, it's time. Like, she was the most faithful person in our family. I can say that very, very, very confidently. And I feel like he told me, like, she's passing the torch to you, which that makes me emotional even thinking about. But I'm trying not to cry today. And so it was just one of those moments. And so I opened up my devotional, and that night it was talking about the peace that we have by knowing about like our guardian angels and how our time on earth is not what we're here for, and that there's an eternity beyond that we get to spend with Jesus. And I just had so much peace. And she was really sick while she was here on earth. And so I think just transforming my mind and knowing that she was so glad to be with her husband, to be with her son, to be with the Lord, to be one of his angels, that there was just so much peace that I could have from it. And so there was a turn in my grief at that point that it was like, okay, I can do this. I can get through this. I can lean on God. And so I did. And I think I went through a season where my faith started to grow. I was reading devotionals. I wasn't quite reading the Bible yet. But I was interested. I was intrigued by knowing who God was. So that was the second tap. And so 2019, I won't say it was a great year. I was still battling grief. I knew I could lean on God, but grief is still such a real and alive thing. And so, it just wasn't a great year. So 2019, 2020, those were rather tough because I got into a pretty bad relationship. That's a story for another day. I got into a pretty bad relationship, and I just was mad at God. I was so angry at God, and I was like, God, you're putting me through things that I never asked to be going through. I'm trying to be a good person. I've turned my life around. I'm trying not to be evil to everybody. I'm trying to be kind to my families and my friends, all of these things, but why do things keep happening to me? And so I was kind of just wavering through life, not really talking much to people. I got really, really closed off those years. And that's kind of when I started going into my shell. I was very extroverted in the beginning of high school. And then towards the end, there was just so much going on around me that I just like balled up into my own little bubble. And I didn't really want to be bothered with people anymore. I didn't really feel confident in who I was. I went through an extensive season of therapy. I went through neurofeedback to help battle with my battle with depression and anxiety, just because I had genuinely lost like my spark. I feel like I had let everything just like really, really internalize in my life. And I'll get into specifics later on. But I decided to get baptized in 2020 just because I was going back to school, or in 2021. I was going back to school. I went to LSU for 2 years, in person, 1 year online. But before my second year, I was like, okay, I need to get it together. Like, I knew I needed to fix something. And so I thought baptism was going to fix me, which it does not. I will say that. So baptism is supposed to be an outward expression of an inward decision. I knew that I had accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior, but I wasn't ready to be made new. I wasn't ready to let go of everything that I had been through, everything I had done, all the shame, all the guilt, everything I had once felt about myself. I wasn't ready to let that go. And so I got into another relationship in college, and, I thought that was who I was going to marry. I really did. And, we wound up breaking up due to a lot of, toxic things that were happening. And so the summer of 2022, I got an internship at the church on accident. And let me repeat that, it was on accident. My mom had just started there, and I went up there just to see her. I was in my red hair phase, y'all. Like, my hair was red. I was not planning on working at the church. I was wilding out a little bit after my breakup. And so I went up to the church, and at the time, I was the Greek Life social media coordinator at LSU. So I was making content for the Greek Life office. And I was talking to the youth pastor, and he was like, "Oh, like, what are you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, "Oh, I'm just working on this content, whatever." I was working on a graphic. And he was like, I could really use some help with social media. So I was like, "Oh, like, I'll help you. There's no problem with that." I need a Red Bull break. Okay, so I'm like, I have no problem helping. So he was like, "Okay." I was like, "But I leave tomorrow, so, like, I can't really sit and talk that long today. But I can get on Zoom with you when I get back to Louisiana." So I go back to my apartment, and I didn't know this was an interview, but it is always an interview. It's always an interview. Hear that clearly. It's always an interview. And so he was like, "Okay, I'm going to send you an offer letter to be an intern." So I was like, "Okay, but I'm in Louisiana still. This is April. So, like, I'm in Louisiana still. I don't finish for another month, so I can't really be there." And he was like, "That's okay. Just send me some content. We'll make it work. And then once you get here, you'll have to, come in during the week and help out, all of that." So I was like, "Okay, cool." So that summer I go, and when I tell you, I was not being an example of the church. I can honestly say that at this point in my life, I was not. I was still partying. I was still drinking. I was still doing all of these things heavily while interning. And I wasn't being kind to myself. And so halfway through the summer, I went to summer camp. And that was when I realized the impact that I could have if I fully decided to give my life to the Lord, like, truly. And so I had a group of girls, and I will forever love them, forever remember them, because as much as I was there for them, they were there for me that week. That was the first time that I got to hear stories of people younger than me giving their life to Christ and accepting Christ. And it made me so emotional that a lot of them had similar testimonies to me. They had lost people close to them. I skipped over a major part in my testimony, and that's what I get for just not writing anything down and just going. In 2020, my ex-boyfriend passed away. And that sent me very downhill, if I do say. I didn't grieve it for 2 years, though, so that's why I didn't add it in the beginning, because that doesn't really come into the picture until 2022, when I decided to go to therapy because of it. But due to my relationship in college, I was not in the position to grieve an ex, because we all know what people say about, "Oh, if your ex-boyfriend dies and you cry," all of that stuff. And so I did not grieve him until 2022. And so that definitely was like an internal battle that I was struggling with. Anytime I was by myself, I would cry. Anytime I was in the shower by myself, I would cry. And one day I was just driving home, and I lost it. And I really thought I wasn't going to make it, like, all the way back to Houston. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to make it. If I keep driving, I'm going to wreck, because I cannot see. Like, I'm sobbing, crying. And it just hit me that day that he was really gone. And so, yeah, back to, where are we at? 2021, 2022. I don't know where you were at when I started my intern at the church, 2022. So after summer camp, I was like, okay, I need to lock in. Like, I need to get it together. And so I started looking into going to LSU online, just because the way I left LSU for the summer just wasn't good. I wasn't on good terms with anybody. I was in a Greek organization, and there was a lot just going on that I just wasn't proud to say I was a part of at the time. And not just the Greek life organization, like the friend groups I was in. They weren't a reflection of who I wanted to be. And so I was supposed to be moving back in, and I was driving to Louisiana, and I was in the car, and I called our pastor, which was my boss at the time, but I wasn't under him. I was under the youth pastor. And I called our campus pastor, and I was like, look, I am on my way back to Louisiana. I was like, but this is the first time I've heard the Lord tell me I need to be still. And I was like, I never understood when people told me the Lord had talked to them and all of those things, but I was riding in silence, and the Lord told me I needed to be still. And I was like, I think I'm supposed to stay at the church. I don't know how. I don't think it's with youth. I don't think that's where I'm supposed to be. I was like, but for some reason, I need to be at the church. I was like, I will change my schedule. I will sit out a semester. Like, I need to figure it out. I need to be there, and I need to be at the church. And I need to be in Houston. I need to be with my family. I need to be with those who care about me, those who can pour into me. He said, give me 5 minutes, and hung up. And so I'm in the car, and I'm like, God, I don't know what you're doing, but you're doing something, and I need to know before I get to Louisiana what I'm doing here. He calls me back in 5 minutes. He says, okay, we just created a position for you. It didn't exist before this moment, but you're going to report directly to me, and you're going to be over all of the social media at our campus, and that means every ministry. So I went from doing youth to youth, children, small groups, and then just campus-wide events. So I was like, okay, great. See you Monday. And that's basically what it was. He sent me over the thing. I probably was signing it while I was driving, which you shouldn't do. I went to Louisiana. I came back after 2 or 3 days, and then I went back out there. I moved out in one day in the pouring rain by myself. Didn't tell anybody I was leaving. Didn't tell my line sisters. Didn't tell anybody. My ex actually caught me moving out in the rain, which was very embarrassing. Because we lived at the same complex, and he saw me struggling to do this. But I moved out one day by myself. I moved back home, and I started working at the church. And for the past 2 years, I've been working there, and I am now on our core staff. But God has definitely, that was the third tap. Him telling me, be still. And that was basically him telling me, Whitney, you need to sit down somewhere. It is time for you to get it together. I'm not playing any more games with you. Get it together. And so the past 2 years since working at the church, it has been such a drastic shift in my life, and just how the Lord has moved me, how I've been able to impact people, how I've been able to work with people and just impact their relationship with God in even the slightest way. I am just so appreciative for. And so that's kind of here to now. There's so many different gray areas within my testimony that we could harp on, we could talk about, but those are the 3 big taps. And so I just wanted y'all to know a little bit about me before we get started with what we really got going on here. So I thank y'all for listening in. I can't wait to talk to y'all some more. Love y'all. Bye. Good night.